Madam President, I come to the floor to speak in support of the two-year bipartisan budget agreement reached by Representative Ryan and Senator Murray. I'm pleased that the budget agreement passed the House of Representatives with overwhelming bipartisan support, and cloture was invoked in the Senate today. I understand that there are many of my colleagues on this side of the aisle that are very unhappy with this deal and intend to vote against it. My only response to that is I respect their vote, but I'd like to know what we do in order to avoid another shutdown of the government. The American people steadfastly reject a shutdown of the government. So I have concerns about the budget deal. Everybody, I think, does, because the nature of the way business is done. But to somehow vote against it without an alternative to keep the government from shutting down, then I think lacks some intellectual integrity. So my support and vote will be based on two important facts. First, it'll prevent another government shutdown, which we cannot put the American people through, or the people of my state through again. And it goes a long way in alleviating the devastating impact of sequestration on our military. Have no doubt that the sequestration has had a devastating effect on many aspects of our ability to defend this nation. And don't just talk to our leadership, but talk to the men and women who are serving. They don't know where they're going to go next. The pilots aren't flying, the ships aren't sailing, and the training is not being conducted. And that is unfair to the men and women who are serving in their military, which I would remind you all have volunteered to serve this country in harm's way. So this budget deal will avert another government shutdown and reduce the impact of sequestration. It reduced the deficit by roughly $23 billion without raising taxes. You know, there's a noted conservative columnist that writes for the Wall Street Journal who served in the Reagan administration, and she observed in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, and I quote, "The government is now unable even to pass a budget to perform this minimal duty. Instead, Congress and the administration lurch from crisis to crisis, from shutdown to debt ceiling battle. That gives a sense the process itself is broken, and this lends an air of instability or third worldness to the world's oldest continuing democracy. We can't even control our books. We don't even try." And she says that's my context for the Ryan-Murray budget deal. She continued, should it be passed? Yes, yes, and yes. The good things about it are very good. The idea that Republicans and Democrats are capable of coming to a budget agreement is good. The idea that they can negotiate and make concessions and accept gains is good. The idea the U.S. government is able to produce anything but stasis and acrimony is good. That we can still function even in the age of Obama, good. As she noted, this agreement moves us an inch or two in the right direction. Let me tell you what's better than. It's better than moving a few inches in the wrong direction, and it's better than where we've been in a state of agitated paralysis. Just weeks ago, we witnessed the impact the government had shut down on our constituents, and none of us want to go through that again. In my home state of Arizona, the impact was very significant. Nearly 500,000 visitors were turned away from Arizona's national parks during the shutdown. Arizona lost $33 million in visitor spending. At Grand Canyon National Park, food banks had to rush supplies to 2,200 employees of the concessionaires inside the park who were furloughed or laid off. Arizona spent $500,000 in donations to reopen the Grand Canyon for 5 days during the shutdown. The list goes on and on and on. And the approval rating, I would say to my friends on this side of the aisle, of us and our party plummeted. So the damage was severe. Now we have an agreement. And I repeat again to my colleagues who will vote against this, both on that side of the aisle and this side of the aisle. If you got a better idea, bring it up. Let's consider it. Let's vote on it. Because the only alternative to this right now is a government shutdown. So let's not deceive ourselves about why we are voting and what we're voting on. I admit it's not perfect. I think it's caused heartburn for all of us. One potentially problematic provision, and it is problematic, would slow the growth of cost of living adjustments for working age, and I emphasize working age, military retirees. And let me point out that the COLAs for working age military retirees under the age of 62 will continue to grow after 2015, in most cases just more slowly than before. And the fact is that the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, one of the most admired and respected individuals in this Senate, has stated that we will review this provision, and we will review it in the context of the work that is already being done on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and that is a review of all pay, benefits, and aspects of our military that, in the words of former Secretary of Defense Mr. Gates, said that these entitlements in the military are, quote, eating us alive. Let me give you an example. In 2012, military retirees and survivor benefit recipients received $52 billion. In 10 years, that will grow to $59 billion. By 2034, it will grow to $108 billion per year. From 2001 to 2011, payments to military retirees grew by 49%. Every penny of it deserved, every penny of it that I'm proud we gave them. But I don't think there's any doubt that we're going to have to look at this whole issue of the pay, benefits, and retirement and all of that of members in the military in a prospective fashion. And I am confident that one of the first items next year will be taken up in the Senate Armed Services Committee is what we are passing today. But it's going to be brought up in the context of all of the aspects of personnel costs in the military today, keeping in mind that we have an all-volunteer service, and we are proud and pleased the fact that we have America's finest in the military. But I can tell you for a fact that with this lurching from shutdown to shutdown, the draconian effects of sequestration, and I know my colleagues know that in 2014 there's a more severe cut than at any time, that these brave young men and women are getting sick and tired of not being able to do their job because of sequestration. And the best and the brightest already are making decisions as to whether to remain in the military or not. I'd like to mention one small aspect of this that I think is indicative. But about 20 years ago, there was a very large influx of pilots into the civilian airlines as airlines began to expand rather dramatically. That very large number of pilots are now nearing retirement age. There is going to be a dramatic demand for airline pilots who, as we all know, are very well paid. We are offering pilots $225,000 to stay in and fly airplanes in the military. Do you know that the vast majority of these young pilots, these aviators, are not accepting that? And one of the reasons why they're not signing up is because a lot of times they don't fly anymore. They're not operating anymore. And they're spending time away from their homes and their families without being to do what they were trained to do. That is just a small example of the impact of sequestration on the military. And I wish all of my colleagues were members of the Armed Services Committee and would listen to the testimony by our military leaders who tell us that they may not be able to defend this nation in the most efficient fashion already because of the facts of sequestration. So all I can say is that if I'd written this legislation, I think each one of us individually would have written it differently, but we didn't. And the option of shutting down the government The option of further damage inflicted by sequestration, I hope, would override the problems that we see with this agreement. And I want to promise my colleagues that I will work in every way with Senator Levin under his leadership next year. Remember that this COLA issue does not kick in until 2015. I will work with my colleagues and Senator Levin's leadership and Senator Inhofe to review this provision in this bill as to whether it's fair or not and whether it needs to be changed or not. So, again, I challenge my colleagues who will come to the floor and speak against this agreement, tell me what we can vote on and pass and prevent another government shutdown, and then I will be glad to support it. Madam President, I yield the floor.